We had a big live stream last night, folks. Check it out. We went 3 hours on this. Major rumblings in college football on the ACC front, trying to break free. So your thoughts about what could happen?
One thing that I think Florida State has done a very good job at, and the administration, is getting Alford on board and then allowing him to spread a little team around him to do some investigating on how Florida State can get out of this grant of rights. It's all about money, revenue, media rights, and everything. And, Florida State signed up for something that should have never been signed. I mean, it was unbelievable how awful and how long this contract is with the ACC and media rights and how that goes on with the GOR. But just going off of some comments from Alford, that's just kind of like coaches speak. We're just going to say like AD speak right there. He's one of the biggest enforcers. Hearing some things the last couple of days too. He's in line with Clemson and some other schools, top schools in the ACC, pushing to figure out a way to get out of this, or there's got to be some kind of change inside the ACC. But I don't think that Alford is going to wait and sit around for that. He hasn't been. He's been pushing quite a bit, and it's gone to now where he's teaming up with some other universities and their administration. Because if you look at the numbers, we've done this a whole ton of times, how low it is compared to the bigger two conferences and the Power Five. They can even rank them top, like bottom four. It's atrocious. So Florida State and what Alford's trying to do, and then push some things ahead has been nice. That's how it should be. Definitely with Florida State leading the ACC, which is how many millions of people watch this brand, and how many primetime games that Florida State gets, and the amount of money they're getting compared to all the other big dogs and other conferences is just, it's simply not fair. And I'm glad that you're seeing an AD step up for something that should be changed, and it should have been changed years and years and years ago. But now that Florida State is where Florida State is at a tier, it's not at the top tier yet. Still got a lot of things to do and moving parts and stuff, but to now have the last season, and then that there's improvement going on inside this program. They're at a point now where they can step their foot down and say, hey, we're back. It's nice to have Clemson cool. Miami, you can join in on this if you want to, but we're here back. We're back now, and we're ready to fix some things that have needed to be fixed for a very long time. And that hurts a lot of these universities that, Florida State could use. Imagine Florida State being able to add to that budget like we were talking about earlier last week, Mark, on that recruiting side. Imagine having a little bit of extra cash to do something that, they can build some recruiting efforts for, and a whole lot of a variety of different things with their football only facility, where they're really relying on donors to bring in money for that. And that's not the easiest way whatsoever. Definitely at Florida State University, it's kind of select and few on what donors want to do. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Just listening to Phillips, the commissioner for the ACC, I just never feel confident out of any statement that comes out of these guys' mouth. I'm sorry, but it's just how it is. So, Alfred said what he needed to say, but we all know what he's up to, and FSU fans should be all about it. I mean, I know they are, but Florida State's now at the point where you're there now. Let's talk, or let's get out, and we're gonna see. But yeah, Michael Alford has had a staff around him, a team to figure out ways. He's literally got people investigating around him how to get out of this GOR that somehow was agreed to egregiously. It's fathoming how idiotic that was.
It seems like with this pushback that we saw later yesterday, just not hours after we all understood what was going on with the 7 of the ACC getting together with lawyers and pushing ahead to try to figure out how to break this GOR, that they got together and made this statement about, we're all together. We believe in the ACC. We want to continue to work together. Okay. The way I read that is, we all know that Mike Alford when he went to the board of trustees, basically, if you could kind of read between the lines, it was, this isn't going to get fixed. There's just too much of a gap here. There's no way that the ACC's got enough brand power across the board and so forth and so on. There's a number of reasons they're not going to catch up with the Big Ten and the SEC. Therefore, that's the ultimate goal. But in the meantime, we might as well get paid a little bit more and try to stop some of the bleeding in the meantime. So give us our revenue share, up it for the schools, including us, of course, that make this thing go more than anybody else. So why don't we kind of fix what we've got going on, even though it's not going to make up for the disparity, but we can at least do a little bit better in the interim while we're still working on the big picture over here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you said it right. That's what, they need to do. If it's nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to snap out, and nothing's going to happen anytime soon. Got to make some money now. Get it now while you can. Definitely where, like I was just saying, where Florida State's at as a program right now. Hell yeah, this Florida State versus LSU game is going to do stupid numbers. And no matter what, Florida State versus Clemson will do stupid numbers. No matter what, Florida State versus Miami being at Doe Campbell this year, that's going to do stupid numbers. Like, Florida State's brand power is one of the top in college football. And when you add that to a team that's pushing for an ACC championship run, potential playoff berth, it becomes a little unfair. And they're back in the top tier of things. So drop your nuts, Alfred. We're here, baby. We're here to talk. Let's do it.
And obviously that exists in every conference. Ohio State and Michigan go down the line. They carry the Big Ten. Alabama, Georgia, they carry the SEC. So that happens in every conference. But when you're making more than everybody else, I'm guessing you can put up with that. If you're Ohio State or Alabama and you're largely carrying that conference, but you are making more money than anybody else, then you're okay with Vandy getting their cut and Rutgers getting their cut. Because they could make the same claim, but they're also making more money than anyone. So they're okay with sharing, because you got to have somebody to play. So you got to have somebody in the conference to play. If you guys follow me on that point.
To me, the whole thing with Alford, him coming out and saying, or everybody coming out and saying, we want this all to work out. We want there to be solutions. And the ACC supposedly came to Florida State and these other 6 schools saying that they had some different formats that they could set out for them to make more money, which this year that's needed. Like, close the gap as much as possible, because it's nowhere near being closed. And here's the thing, the gap hasn't started in a hole yet. Next season is when the SEC is going to start making $30 million more than the ACC. Next year is when the Big Ten starts making $35 or $40 million more than the ACC is. So you're not trying to catch that gap right this second, which therefore whatever you can get this year, which is extra, which whether that be you get more money because of playoffs, you get more money because of bowl contingencies, you get more money as far as concessions. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe it equals up to $1 million or $2 million. Best case scenario is you get $10 more million out of it than what you projected to get because of unequal revenue sharing. And that's fine for this year. And that's what you're going to hear them say, that we love being part of the ACC. And right now it's time to show that you're a company man and make as much as you possibly can, because next year, I mean, you really don't give your conference a 2-week notice for your 2-week notice. So you're not going to sit there and play hardball on national television with being in the ACC meetings right now. So you're going to agree that, look, they're working their tails off. They're trying to bring us solutions. We're trying to work the solutions out. But we can't say that there's a problem until there's a problem. And officially, the problem doesn't start until next year in the 2024 season, which is then where Florida State and the other schools are going to go, hey, in this contract, it says that we're going to be competitive with our peers. There's a $30 million gap with this group. There's a $35 million group or gap with this group. We're no longer competitive. So it's either dissolve the ACC or let us out of our contract, because this is no longer competitive. And I think there would be lawyers across this planet that would argue that. They would argue that, yes, this is no longer competitive. Their peers are making a substantial amount more than them. And they're, one of the schools, or these are 7 schools that bring just as many views, just as much money to the table as the top 5 or 6 in the SEC and the top 5 or 6 in the Big Ten. And then you look at like the Big 12 or whichever one is over there that's actually going to make more money than Florida State, if not both. And it's just ridiculous to see that Purdue is going to make more money than Clemson, or that UCF is going to make more money than Florida State potentially. Like that's an absolute joke. So no, they're not going to stand for it. Now this year they're going to get as much money as they can out of the situation, because we're not jumping out of the conference this year. Like there's so many things that go along with getting out of a conference and going to a new one. It don't happen overnight. It's a process. But what in the big picture to look at is you get all the money you possibly can right now. And then therefore when we go to court to have these conversations about us not being equal to our peers, we're not being compensated as much as everyone else is, and how unfair it is, and that they're breaking the contract. It's a breach of contract because they're not holding up to their end of the deal, stating that we're going to be competitive with all peers around the country. That's now no longer true. And a lot of people are asking, why doesn't ESPN jump in and say, look, we can give more money for the contract? And I was like, there's no reason for ESPN to do that. And the only one possible reason that there could be is that, yes, if Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and some of these other schools, maybe not all of them, but some of these schools do end up in the Big Ten, then ESPN does lose all revenue on Florida State, all revenue on Clemson. Because if I'm not mistaken, the Big Ten's CBS, NBC, and Fox, so they don't really play on ESPN. So the only argument that I think ESPN, that people would have that ESPN steps up and gives more money, is that you're going to lose all that revenue from a Clemson, or all that revenue from a Florida State, or they're that confident that they can get them landed in the SEC. And if you get them landed in the SEC, then you get the best of both worlds again. But I don't think that every school that makes the ACC money right now, as in the Miami, the Clemson, the Florida State, and maybe North Carolina or NC State, I don't think that all of them land in the SEC, but I think that the Big Ten and the SEC comes out firing on who outbids who for those top programs. Right now, I would say that the Big Ten's got the most, or the majority of the amount of money, and it makes most sense for these schools to go there first. But a lot of people are infatuated with the SEC when it comes to football. And that's the other problem that we have as fans. Only focus on a sport, one particular sport, or we only focus on what revenue football brings or what revenue basketball brings. And then you don't look at the full picture, as in how much money you get if you do go to the Big Ten. The research money that you get from the AAU, all the money that they share, you're talking about a crazy amount of money that completely flips the university as a whole, not just the football program, not just the TV revenue. We're talking about just a stupid amount of money that goes all the way across, including
billions.
Yeah. What I've been explaining to people is I don't care if we end up in the SEC or if we end up in the Big Ten. But if I had a choice, I want to end up in the Big Ten because of what Florida State's trying to do with research, what they are doing with research currently. And there's about 15 more million a year with what the Big Ten's doing versus the SEC. I think schools in the Big Ten will eventually make like 102, 103 million a year, and I think the SEC is geared to make like 80-something million a year. Now, will that all change? The craziest part of this is that the SEC, the Big Ten, I think the Big 12 or whatever it is, they all go back to the negotiating table again before the ACC goes back. And it's crazy to sit there and think that the ACC thinks, or that anyone thinks, that these schools aren't going to do everything in their possible power to get out of a situation that's going to hold them till 2036. Because if you were to sit in this conference until 2036, you're going to be so far behind, it's arguably you'll never catch up. It's not a possibility. So to sit here and think that 7 schools came together, potentially a number 8 has came to the table, to sit here and think that by next year you're not going to get some type of answer on what these schools are going to do, then you're wanting to put blinders on, and you're wanting to think that some hero is going to jump in here and throw hundreds of millions of dollars around, and it's just not going to happen. The ESPN doesn't have to negotiate this. There's no reason for them to. If they get half of the teams from the ACC that are money makers into the SEC, then it's a win-win for them. It's potential that the ACC is losing money. I mean, ESPN is losing money on having a damn ACC network. It's potential that they're not doing anything besides blowing money in it because it's so terrible. I mean, for Bally Sports to be head and heels over what the ACC network is, that's already ridiculous within itself. Sunshine Sports is better than the ACC network. I mean, the best commercials they can get is the My Pillow commercial. So, I mean, we're not talking about if the ACC goes away, that ESPN is losing some high dollar revenue source, because they're not. They're probably blowing money in it. It's probably a tax write off for all I know. So to sit here and to think that ESPN is going to invest more money into the ACC network or invest more money into it might be maybe Florida State, Clemson, and Miami bring so much money to the table that it breaks it even. But the problem is the below average teams that aren't getting the viewership, that aren't bringing in any type of money, it's not worth them to throw that kind of money in it for 3 teams when those 3 teams could go elsewhere, and maybe you land 2 of the 3 in the SEC, and now you're getting all the riches from it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I don't think that Florida State, I don't think that Clemson or Miami, or I don't even think there's an ACC regardless, unless there's some crazy thing happen and they get some teams out of the lower tier conferences to come up in the ACC, and it happens. But if these 8 teams, from what we've all heard, if 8 teams come forth and say that they want out, then it dissolves the ACC. I don't know how else that's supposed to work, but if you've got 8 universities telling you this is not working for us, this marriage is over, it's time to divorce, I mean, usually the people that want a divorce get it.
Well, Chris, you went in a number of great directions right there. So I'll try to weed through what sticks out to me. So you brought up both the SEC and the Big Ten going to the and the Big 12 going back to the negotiating table before the ACC gets a chance in 2036, if there is an ACC at that point. Everybody should realize that these contracts have never gone down. There have never been a conference has never gone from contract to contract and had the money go down. They are doing nothing but going up, and they're going to go up even exponentially for the SEC and the Big Ten, because they're doing nothing but getting more powerful and more valuable as we go. And the contract that the Big Ten just signed was $7 billion and only a 7-year contract. So that's one thing. The other thing is I'm guessing that a lot of Florida State fans would like to play in the SEC for obvious reasons. From a location standpoint, they're schools and teams that they're used to seeing, used to being close to. You can make easy road trips to Auburn and other places. I get that. Florida, of course, but already play the Gators on a regular basis. They're 2 great football conferences. The SEC is better on the field right now. The Big Ten is the second best conference. I don't think either one is debatable. The SEC is the best, and the Big Ten is the second best. And from a financial and every other standpoint, they're the 2 best by far. So Florida State could not go wrong there. When it comes to the ACC network, I know that when the ACC network rolled out of the gate, and I did have some involvement in this at the time, not heavy involvement, but that was, I believe, 2019 at ESPN. For whatever reason, and I read a few articles at the time and also talked to a lot of people in-house at ESPN as to why the rollout for the ACC network didn't come anywhere close to the SEC. The SEC network basically hit the ground running, and it had the same distribution as ESPN2 did, like that. Like 95 million homes right out of the gate. And the ACC network was 15, 18 million homes, and never, I don't know where the numbers stand now. I can just about guarantee it never caught up. If you watch the productions, not just on the games themselves, but on the documentaries, studio shows, if you're watching the SEC network, you might as well be watching ESPN. If you're watching the ACC network, It's fine. It's okay. You might as well be watching the Big Ten network. Like, it's not in the same ballpark. Why? I don't know. And I would think, to your point, that could be just a huge write-off for Disney. And they already do a zillion other productions and broadcasts. They already owned those facilities. They were already in Charlotte. They already used those facilities for ESPNU. They just turn them into the next production, the next network, the next whatever. I don't think that's a big factor in this.
Well, the best part of it is that not only just Florida State and Clemson realize it, that you've got a multitude of the teams in the conference that realize that, hey, if we go through this until 2036, and this is coming from Miami's always going to be a brand, regardless of how bad they've done over the past 20 years. They're still a huge brand. They're potentially getting back to where they belong. And then you look at Clemson, who has basically carried the ACC for the past 5 or 6 years, with Florida State being down so bad. When those schools are worried about the gap that there's going to be, what makes you think that the guys below them aren't double worried? Because if we're going to get left behind, then they're surely getting left behind, because we're already outperforming what we're getting money wise. We're already nationally competing in facilities with what we're bringing to the table. We're already nationally competing with the recruiting, and those teams already aren't, and they're getting the same amount of money as we are. So what makes anyone think that if there's a $30 to $35 million gap, that these schools, don't diminish? Just, hey, we can't have a football program no more. Like, people don't realize that you're only a couple of years away from some really bad things happening like this, that a university, to save keep, says, hey, we can't afford the football program no more because we can't win on the field. We can't get recruits in. We're not getting televised the way that everyone else does. It's time to close shop. So maybe all the other sports survive, maybe not. But Florida State, Miami, Clemson, probably North Carolina and NC State, Virginia Tech, they are not willing to risk that. There's no way that they're going to risk the potential of it even getting to a point to where they don't want there to be a program. So I just think that Florida State gets to announce in 2024 that they'll be leaving the conference by 2025, 2026, and that you only have to deal with 2 years of revenue gap, and you can come back from that. You can't come back from 13, 14 years of it. It's not possible. So I'm ready for whatever it is to happen. I know everyone is in this day and time. We can just turn on a screen, whether it be YouTube or a television screen, or hell, now you can get food out of a microwave in 30 seconds. I know we're all ready for it to happen right now, but when you're talking about this many moving parts, this amount of money that we're speaking of, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but I don't think that Alford and these other athletic directors across the ACC wasted any time with it, because time is of the essence. We can't buy time. We can't get it back. So it's time to say something now and not wait till next year. Let's let them know this year we're unhappy. That way it's not a roadblock in the middle of the ACC. Like, hey, we're leaving, by the way. I mean, you don't want to come in and just say that. So you got to let them know, we're going to give you every opportunity to fix this, but being honest, there is no fixing this. There's nowhere the ACC can snatch this kind of money and make this work. It's not there. It's visibly not possible. So we'll do the best that we can while we're still here, but I'm looking forward to a different logo on the left chest of our uniforms, and I know that other people are as well.
And it's a lot more complicated than this, but I can come up with two basic reasons why it's not going to happen. One is that the ACC simply is not worth as much as the SEC and the Big Ten. So no network's going to give them as much money as the SEC and the Big Ten. We just did a huge series on TV ratings for 2022. And sure, Florida State holds its own. Clemson holds its own. That's pretty much it. There's a pretty good drop off after that. Miami, Louisville do okay in TV ratings. But in regards to, just to give you a comparison that's not going to poke any fun at the ACC, I'll take it outside the conference. Ohio State Northwestern doesn't sound like a very good football game, does it? That game outrated every game in the Pac-12 last year. Every game, even USC and UCLA, their top-rated game. Just more people watch the SEC and the Big Ten. That's all there is to it. Now, obviously, Florida State is a huge brand, a huge draw that would only add to that. And certainly both of those conferences would love to have Florida State on board. So that's one reason why it just simply is not valuable enough. And to our second point, it's not going to happen because there's just no reason for ESPN to do that. They're not going to suddenly say, oh, yeah, we made a mistake. You're really worth each 72 million a year, not 36 million a year. So we're going to hand the money over. We made a mistake. Sorry. We undervalued you. You made a stupid deal, and we're going to be kind and make that up for you. No.
It's like, that episode that you did quite some time ago. I don't remember if I was on that one or not, but where you explained the type of channel, what, like ABC is always going to have crazy viewership because one has it. Two, ABC's like, it's the channel. But then you look at the networks that have the Big Ten, and when you're talking about Fox, you're talking about CBS. Like, those are those premier channels. There were some fans that were in a Twitter space. They were like, TV's TV. They're going to get viewership regardless of what channel it's on. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's not true. And that was based off of the episode that I was either a part of or watched because there were so many. But I'm like, no, that's not true. Florida State and Clemson do a good job of getting on the premier channel that the ACC gets to watch. But I would love to know what Florida State does on a Fox or a CBS. I know what they do on ABC, which is great, but when I look at Fox, Fox doesn't resonate with me other than football, or maybe potentially baseball at times. When I look at CBS Sports, nothing resonates other than football, especially college football. So it's like, it does matter what network you're on because here's all the proof to it, and y'all threw it out there perfectly, and I was absolutely just astonished by the numbers that these channels do versus like whatever this deal was they were trying to get done with CW that has just reruns of other shows. I'm just like, I can't believe people are potentially going to this.
Yeah, you have to make it easy for people to run into the games. You don't make it hard. You don't make it difficult for them to have to find it. And just one other note about the Big Ten deal, and then we'll wrap it up. For me, what I thought was brilliant in this deal is they basically went to an NFL model. The NFL's on every network. They do CBS, they do Fox, they do NBC on Sunday night, they do ESPN on Monday night. And they obligate those networks to promote their games on the other networks. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear CBS talking about and giving you a lineup that says, oh, the NFL games are going to be on NBC and Fox and da-da-da. But they have to because it's in the contract. The NFL says you got to promote our games wherever they are. Well, the SEC is going to be relegated to all ESPN networks. But for the Big Ten, when they're on NBC, you're going to see, well, you got to flip over later tonight. The other Big Ten games going to be on CBS. Then the other Big Ten games next week are going to be on Fox. And they're going to be on all three major networks every Saturday at different times. And before and after all those games, they're going to be promoting their other games on all the other networks. I think it's, I think it was a good move to make.